Started in a prompt fashion. I just wanted to welcome everyone again to the second installment of our Military Credit for Prior Learning Implementation webinar series. And again, we have today presenting Dr. Dallas Kratzer and Don Busick, both of whom have been long-term partners of ours and are nationally recognized for the work that they do in the credit for prior learning space. And just as a reminder too, from a logistics standpoint, if you have comments or questions, please feel free to use the Q&A at the top of the screen. And if you would raise your hand if you wish to speak, we can unmute you in this webinar format. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Don and Dallas.
Thank you. So Dallas, I'll let you drive. And then, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, we held the first one, phase one, last Friday, and that was for those institutions that were exploring how to implement a military credit for prior learning program. Today's presentation is the phase two of that, which is identified within the implementation guide out in the Google site repository. Phase two is for those institutions that have already done their research and more than likely have military credit for prior learning processes already in place and maybe even a policy, but you're looking to grow the program, expand access, and build capacity on your campus to increase the usage of this opportunity. So with that, Dallas, let's go ahead and start with our presentation today.
All right, very good. Are you seeing the
Yes.
presentation? Is it showing up now?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, we're going now into phase two. We finished phase one last week. And again, we'll just work through it as we did last week. It's very similar in formatting. We do that intentionally to make sure that it has a good rhythm to it. Just as a reminder, you have the phase, the stage, the task, and the action steps. Each one of those has a purpose behind it. The focus area, we're looking at a statement that indicates the intent of what we're doing in that phase or stage. The action, what's going to happen, there'll be note boxes, you'll see those throughout, and then the tasks that you need to accomplish. Additionally, there are checklists for each section. You'll see those again here in just a moment. So let's dive in. We've moved into phase two. In phase two, this is the develop stage where we are focusing on building that campus MCPL program and in preparation for the next stage, which will be implement. Important about is you have gotten buy-in from your senior leadership, from your staff and faculty, because you've done all that legwork up front to make sure that they know where you're headed. All right. Now we will also implement some training programs, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we jump into that, you'll see that note box. And I just want to make the point that the working group doesn't necessarily conduct the MCPL training. As a matter of fact, I would almost recommend that they not do the training for the staff and faculty, but to have someone come from the outside, an industry partner, a subject matter expert, to come in and facilitate that training. Part of the reason for this is that having that outside set of eyes that can speak into a lot of the different elements of credit for prior learning, military credit, and how that works. It's kind of that old adage, you know, a prophet isn't respected in their own homeland, hometown. It's not that they're not respected, but by laying the foundation that they have gotten the same training that the faculty are now getting, the staff are now getting, helps to build that buy-in to it. Now, after the initial training for the staff, from that point forward, the MCPL program manager, whoever's leading that program, yes, they should be doing that training, because we want to train the trainer at the same time to where you can then do it in-house. In building that program, one of the very first tasks as you build out the program will be to identify who's going to lead the MCPL program, who will be the single point within the institution to be responsible for managing, oversight, all the activities that go along with it. Because the working group is there to launch, to bring it all together. But once it's launched, somebody should be that single focal point that can help leadership when leadership has a question, that can answer questions that staff and faculty might have instead of constantly going back to the working group. And that person, that could be a full-time person or it could be a part-time person. It's depending on what your institution plans to do in the area of CPL. Many times when you're starting with the MCPL, colleges and universities will use a part-time position, assign it to someone as an additional responsibility. As you go along and you start building capacity, that can transition into a full-time role. Because as we build out the MCPL program, our intention is to go even further and then integrate CPL, which will be the non-military component into what you're doing. We're starting with MCPL because it is the low-hanging fruit. The assessments have already been done. The credit evaluations have already been accomplished, and this makes it easy. Don, any additional thoughts there on that first?
Yeah, I would say in action step 1A, where the third bullet denotes about establishing the roles and responsibilities. Earlier, I said that hopefully with time allows, we will give you a demonstration of our Google Site repository for those of you that are new to this project. But out there in that repository, we have sample job descriptions that we've collected from around the country that will aid you in this task, the work group in the task of establishing what the roles and responsibilities of the military credit for prior learning program manager, coordinator, but designated lead entity.
Great. Yep. And we do hope to have that time today to do that because it is a growing and living site with lots of helpful information. Now, the second action step in there is to develop a timeline. Once you go from all of the planning and the identifying and understanding the culture and how MCPL works, you need to identify that timeline, those things that need to be accomplished to launch the program, because that's where we're headed. The next step, the next stage is to implement. So putting together that timeline is significant, and we've identified a few things. Feel free to add, take away, modify in any way that will help your organization to better plan for that implementation phase. And the second task within uh, the development stage or develop stage is to make sure that you've taken the time now to revise or establish your MCPL policies and practices. All right. Some schools may already have policies in place. Maybe it's for CPL by itself, but we want to make sure that we've got good MCPL policies in place. And to do that, the action steps that we're looking at is by identifying the students, developing the policy to make sure that you have good methods in identifying the students, how you're going to handle the transcripts, when MCPL will be granted and when it will not, and when it's not, why it's not. Okay. And really, you need the same thing for when it is approved because we should be able to see the learning outcomes to make the linkage to the credit for prior military credit for prior learning. And then also making sure our policies address situations where there might be a need for an appeal. Now, as I mentioned, you may already have a CPL policy, and it will just be a refinement, all right, or a revision to include the MCPL side. Don?
Yeah, those are all really good points. The reason we focused on the military credit for prior learning is because it's the first student target population to test out all of these tools that we've developed in the prior two projects in relation to a statewide credit for prior learning program of services. So we're testing out a lot of the tools with this smaller group of student target population. But like Dallas said, you should have a separate policy because the military and how you administer and evaluate the JSTs and crosswalk them to the pathways is a little bit different than you do for your traditional adult learner type students. So with that, and a student appeals process for this should be established and documented, and they need to be aware of what that is. And then as well as a lot of times we see the military credit for prior learning housed around either a veterans office right there on a college campus or within the registrar's office, who actually administers the bigger credit for prior learning for all students offices. So it's good to have, when you take a look at whose all offices this touch, identify where this particular program of service will be housed. Another thing is, it would be good to include within that, therefore you'll review it annually, but the military financial aid opportunities that your university accepts. And that's different for different states and for different institutions. We found that in some states there's state benefits for veterans enrolling, and then there's also the federal benefits when they're enrolling. So it's good to do the homework in that. So the coordinator, the program manager, the office itself, when they speak to and counsel veteran students, they can speak to all the facets of this program of services. It's like a buffet of services.
Right. And you bring up a great point too about the fact that we need to think through all the places that they touch and where we place this office, because there are some, as you mentioned, put it in registrar, or they have the certifying official do this. The certifying official is really the financial arm of this. And
Mhm.
when you put them in this place to be the CPL coordinator also, that can become really challenging because many times they're also identified as the veteran services person,
Yeah.
which this is not part of veteran services roles for the veteran service office, but it is connected to.
Mhm.
So we have a whole other discussion, which we went through a lunch and learn back in November, which this is November, back in October, talking about the different places that the Veteran Services Office touches, and MCPL is one of those. So making sure you really place it well. I know where I prefer for it to be, and this is often in the student services area because it is very much related to student services.
Mhm.
Yeah, everybody else has their opinion too. So your school needs to decide what they will do with this. Now, the second part of this is in action step 2B is establishing the procedures. Now, we can also call these practices. I like them called as practices, but we're really early on. So right now we've just got to set it up as a procedure. How do we expect to handle this? And as we manage that, it will then become what our practice is. How will we deal with our students? So when you look at policy, that sets the framework. The practices where the rubber meets the road. How we'll deal with the student. Anything else you want to comment on that one,
Nope,
Don?
I think we've covered that.
Cool, cool. Then, as you move into the last part of the first stage, and this is a lot of stuff going on all at the same time. At least it sounds that way, but it's not. This is going to be a several month process. And in that, you need to start that training with the faculty. You've identified the training in phase one. You've evaluated the training. You may have even taken the training as part of the WG, the working group. But now the training needs to be conducted for the staff and faculty, equipping them to better understand MCPL. And sometimes we need to help them understand the military culture. So it could be a blending of several things, but your working group will have decided what kind of training do we want to make available to our staff and faculty. And in that, you've looked at all the different aspects of, do you want to have the American Council on Education come in? Do you want to have the Council on Post uh, Adult and Experiential Learning, CALE, or is there some other third party or SME that you might want to have come in and do this training for you? Additionally, I would recommend building out a resource library like what we have on the Google site for everyone right now. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that, Don? Both those two?
Sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
sure. So where we're at with this type of training, and this is where we want to build institutional capacity to support the military credit for prior learning. So that in difference of the first training that was done, it was specifically for the work group members to understand their task and to help develop and implement a program of services. But now it's to build capacity. And this is why. Many times credit for prior learning, military or traditional, is open-ended. It's not just on the front end of the admissions process and enrollment. It should also be viewed in the middle of every student academic journey. And this is why, especially with military, some of our military students are still active and they're still
Mhm.
getting annual training and they go for their annual duty. That training could be added to their transcript, especially if it's updated artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, new healthcare EMT type training related, and say they're in an academic journey healthcare pathway. So it's open, it's just not a one time and we're done with this student. It needs to be viewed throughout their academic journey while they're at your institution as an enrolled student. So it's important that faculty understand this because it may be faculty and not an admissions office recruiter suggesting you just got back. What did you learn? And I wonder if we should take what you've learned and see if we can get any additional credit for prior learning awarded to your transcript. It's real
Yeah,
critical for faculty to understand it's not a one and done. It can be over lifelong learning academic journey for that student.
right. And a good example of that is as service members in the Army move around into different jobs. I think it's a 9-week course on how to be a recruiter. And once you complete that 9-week course, that training alone brings in 9 additional hours. And one of those is interpersonal communication, which is a gen ed credit. Well, they may need that to complete their gen ed. And by doing that continuous evaluation, being open to adding more in there, that can help them accelerate their degree completion significantly. So great point there, Don. And for those schools that are going to use the experiential learning side of it, the on-the-job training, as service members are promoted, they go to a higher level, and ACE has evaluated that level progression and determined that there could be additional credit recommendations for that, particularly at the more senior positions where it's a strategic perspective as opposed to an operational or technical side. So it's taking that into consideration. All right. Now, phase two, here we go. We're going to implement. This is the most exciting part. This is what you've been waiting for. We're going to launch the program. And anytime you launch a new program, we always hope that it will be just smooth as silk, but it will not. Okay. There'll be challenges. There will be things that we weren't expecting. Hopefully, we've mitigated many of those things. We've covered that. But in the launch, there's some things that we need to make sure that we do. We want to focus on making sure that that program office is set up well and positioned to do good business. Our student facing side of it, our faculty facing side, external and internal facing. So just making sure that we have all that focus needs to be on all the activities related to launching the program. And then the action, of course, is launching the program itself. So let's dive into it. What does this mean? So when you go to officially launch your MCPL program, the key to the success very early on is senior leadership support. Again, this is where your working group is going to go back to the task force, and the task force and the senior leadership will get a chance to see what's going to be launched and how it will be done and what they need to do to help the campus to know, hey, this is a new venture that we're doing and we're all in on it. Senior leadership buy-in and promotion is key. It will help everyone to be focused in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, and making the connections with those other offices. We mentioned a couple in here, the department, the marketing department, the admissions office, recruiting, several different things. Don, I'm sure there's something that I haven't fully covered in here. Jump in.
Well, in thinking and looking at how do you work with the marketing, while you may have a current existing program, this new enhanced version, by walking through these stages and steps in the implementation plan, it's going to be a new heightened. And you will be asked to benchmark your current program, and then the task force should have tasked the work group with, let's take a look. Do our policies need updated? How can we grow and expand access to this program? So by benchmarking yourself, say you currently are enrolling 30 military affiliated students annually or each term. Maybe to grow the program, your next new goal would be 60 students. So the marketing department needs to understand where are those markets to pick up, potentially additional military students to enroll into these programs of study. And how do they tap into the access to get access to the credit for prior learning? So these are types of conversations in the earlier stage where we talked about the process mapping. Where all does it touch, and where in your community, your service region, for your campus, would this be most viable to succeed and in order for you to meet your goals when you're launching this new enhanced program or just a brand new program from start?
Right. And along with that, some other things to consider. You're going to see some service members with CLEP exams that they've used. And, we want to remember to use that. So we have this note here that, be familiar with CLEP exams and how your institution accepts them. I didn't put DSSTs into here because to me, CLEP and DSST exams are synonymous. They really are the same thing. And schools should look at those also. Another valuable resource in this CLEP world is modernstates.org. This is a free website for CLEP prep to get individuals ready for this. Our non-military students can benefit from this also. As a matter of fact, the modernstates.org, if you go through their video vignettes to prepare for a CLEP exam, they will pay for or give you a voucher for your first CLEP exam. So it's free. It's a great way to get some additional recognized credit for areas of expertise. Moving on into part B, as we're launching this program and we're putting it in place, we need to continue to refine with our faculty the degree paths, how we can get it completed, because this is all new. We won't be able to identify everything. It seems to me every time I've gone through one of these, there's always something that we didn't consider or should have considered. And a faculty member will say, you know what, maybe we do need to add this, or maybe we need to take this off. So being willing and constantly checking with your faculty on how they're integrating it and how it's working for them, trying to address questions before they become issues. And this is the role of that military MCPL coordinator, or you see it here as a CPLC. All right. I like all the shortcuts of identifying things, WG, MCPL, PO, and just know that that's what we're looking for there.
And I'll add back to that last slide.
Sure.
Remember, this could be one topic alone that professional development should be provided to faculty. And so much as, do the faculty understand, and it may be part of their role when they're developing or they're enhancing current curriculum. And then what are those degree pathways, and what are the competencies that can be crosswalked to the JST and back and forth. So by them understanding what we mean by the degree pathways and assessment, and then how does the JST apply to that, it's really critical. And there are some great training vendors out there that just do this. We did it here in Missouri. It was a two-day session. We had Ace and Kale come in, and we trained 65 faculty on how to take current programs of study and to further develop these degree pathways and crosswalks with the JSTs and the competency-based skill sets. So that right there is one topic that you should be given consideration when you're looking at your professional development training for your campus staff and faculty.
Right. And along with that, sometimes the faculty needs, there's some faculty specific training that needs to happen, and there's some registrar, transfer services, academic advisors specific training. Because one of the things that I've seen as I've been out in this field, academic advisors want to help. Many times, though, the faculty hear something from the student and they go, "Hey, I think you should either collect this or your military credit, the training you've had from the military, you're already meeting all the learning outcomes. So maybe we should look at this for credit for prior learning."
Mhm.
The faculty, though, tend not to be as engaged with the ACE military guide, whereas the academic advisors are. And the academic advisors can learn how to use that
Mhm.
ACE military guide to glean out information to pass to the faculty members to say, "Hey, this person's in your class, but they've had these learning outcomes identified by ACE." So you can see there's two different types of training that might go on there, and so you need to look at that also. All right, data collection. At this stage in the game, you have had some discussion about data collection. The task force initially set some benchmarks on how many military students you have right now, how many credits are you already recognizing from the JST. But now that MCPL coordinator needs to clearly identify additional areas of data collection so that you can begin to prepare for phase three, which is evaluate. And in the evaluation process, we need to count the beans to make sure that we are getting a return on investment or not. Because if we're not getting a return on investment, we might need to go back through a continuous improvement cycle to see why we're not getting that, or if it's just something that is an anomaly to validate it. If we're not getting a return on investment, we have to figure out why. So we just don't spend money on something that is not producing for our institution. Don?
I think the data collection is very critical. For those that do, some of you may already be collecting some basic data points, just maybe not all of them, but some basic. But I think your coordinator and the work group will identify several data points that will help them better administer the program. Also, you'll also start identifying what are the popular military go-to pathways, academic pathways
Mhm.
that are very popular. And then are those programs, or is that curriculum, does it need to be revised or enhanced anyway going forward, since some of your students may be active and going back for additional military training? So I think the data collection, it speaks to in itself that it validates the program, why it is successful, and it identifies gaps where it's not, and where you can do implement improvement processes. It also is very telling to your community, your board of trustees at your university or college, about, we have implemented this and given it a whole new enhancement and heightened awareness through a marketing campaign effort. And look what we're doing for our veterans within our community. We've increased enrollments, we've increased their skill sets, and we've provided a solid skilled workforce labor pool to our current economy within our community that this college serves. That touches everybody in the ecosystem of credit for prior learning.
Right. And it also helps us to stay focused because, just to your point, Don, we need to find where we're going to be the most productive. For example, journalists. There are journalists in the military, but that population is so incredibly small that it might not be worth the squeeze to go through a long process of evaluating all that they're doing and then only get one or two students a year or less. But they do have business leadership. They do have those skills as they move up in rank, which is another element that we can evaluate. And
Mhm.
understanding that in the business community, this could be very profitable. for the business courses and management courses. So making sure that you're focusing on those things that provide the best return. Now, having said that, you can also then, as you expand your MCPL into a CPL program, you can use what you've done with the military to benchmark off of like jobs in the civilian sector. And you may have a large population of folks in a what doesn't look like a large career field in the military, but you do have them in the civilian sector. So just another thought. Well, with all of this, there's a lot of writing, but there's a checklist. And you can take the checklist and make sure very quickly that you're hitting all those gates. Everything you saw in the walkthrough on each stage is here on the checklist. It's a quick location for you to go to and say, have we done these things? You get this when you go out to the Google site, you get this as a Word document so you can add to or take away from there. Hopefully, we've provided everything for you, but as I said at the beginning, it's really hard to hit everything. Even with as much time as Don and I have had in this field, there are still things you sometimes go, didn't think about that. So,
Right.
all right, Don, I think we are at the end.
I think now we can possibly, if we take 5 minutes and show them the Google repository.
Sure. Let's, if you'll field any questions while I'm bringing that up. So
Sure,
give me
I
just a
will.
second. Okay.
And
we,
as he's bringing it up, yeah, just as again, as a reminder, you can use the Q&A or raise your hand, we'll unmute you.
Wow, it's very quiet out there.
I will want to add, and Stacy, you can add to my comment here, but the data collection is really critical, and it's for, don't wait for the state, the Commission of Higher Ed to come in and say, okay, we're going to start collecting these data points. But what I'd like, many of you are collecting it on your own. And when you create a military credit for prior learning office with a coordinator, sometimes it's that person that's doing the data collection, because they're also the one that's going to be writing annual reports or quarterly reports about the program of services that are being offered. So be mindful that you can collect on anything that you think you and your work group and your leadership task force desire to know. I know that the state is looking at it, the institutional research directors, it's on their agenda. I think we're probably 18 months out before CHEDS is ready to start collecting hard data from everybody, but go ahead and start collecting your own for your own benefit, but also to share with CHE staff about, we never thought we needed this data, but now we do, and this is why.
And I'm not there yet. I'm almost to it. So I had a little computer issue that's not letting
Yeah.
me get into my account,
Oh,
which is really weird.
Well, I will also share with everyone just that we are taping this, and Dallas is putting it on the Google site. So if you need to share this with your colleagues as you go back and you're in the development process, please know that these resources will be available on the Google site.
And we were just looking at that yesterday, and we have quite a few people that have signed into the Google site and have accounts now and are accessing. I think we're up to 44. So that's awesome news that everybody's getting in there now and utilizing it.
I wanted to highlight a comment that Allegro had, and she put it in the chat. She think a key takeaway for them will be on connecting existing aspects of the proposed military CPL solution. And that connection creates a lot of value, as you all have described. And we know her institution has done a lot of work around MCPL. So I think, Dallas, you pointed out, there's always room for growth and improvement.
Right. Okay, I am back into it. So give me just a second to do a screen share.
I'm going to mute just for a second here.
There we go. All right. Are you seeing it yet?
Yes, we've got it.
Okay, very good. Well, let's walk through this. As you can see, we've got the implementation plan, and as you use this guide, always remember there's a plan, and there are things that work together between them. We don't want to. We didn't want to replicate what was in the plan and make the guide that much longer. So you'll want to go back and refer to those things occasionally. These do work in tandem with one another. Additionally, on the Google site, lots of policy, what's gone on beforehand, upcoming events, uh, the lunch and learns that Steve talked about. You can see we've already got phase one out there, so you can jump out there and take a look at that. And as soon as we get phase two, I'll drop it out there. You can also see what the working group accomplished over September and October, August, September, October timeframe, and then the additional trainings that we've done with the lunch and learns in August and October. Now, as you go through this guide, this is a working living document. So it's not necessarily a website. It has a lot more to it. There are drop downs for several of these, and you'll want to go into those drop downs under the implementation. Once you click on there, you'll see all of the tasks, the checklists are quickly accessible there, some videos, and things that we're working on. So if you have something that you want to add to the parking lot that you would like to see improved, that's where we made the decision to create the implementation guide. Is because somebody said, hey, this is something we want to do. So we'll be pulling this off of there now because we've accomplished it once we present on Friday, which is when we'll do phase three. Additionally, under resources, you have the current institutions that are signed up, and we're working with them, and they are part of this long process that we've been going through. Don, do you want to talk about how to get on this list?
Sure. So these hyperlinks of these institutions and their policies are those that all participated actively in the assessment survey of where we benchmark currently what is going on with military credit for prior learning. And that was the assessment that was done this past summer in June. Many of you did provide links, but we found with the links to your policies, they were broken. But we think they were broken because they're under construction, because you're redeveloping or enhancing your policies in preparation for your Collegiate Purple Star application coming up in January. But once you do get your hyperlinks fixed, please shoot us an email and we'll throw them out here. But you can see some samples of other institutions within Indiana and what their policies look like. I think also what we have underneath at the very, click on that, the implementation resources. The coordinator, this is where we mentioned earlier, these are sample job descriptions for your military credit for prior learning coordinator, program manager, whatever title your institution would like to give, but some were requesting, can we see some samples of what it would take to have someone full-time or part-time to do the role as the lead person, the go-to, the contact person at your institution for the military credit for prior learning programs and services. So we've provided you some samples to help you as well. I want everybody to understand this Google site repository was created because the Clearinghouse 2.0 is not quite ready yet for the state to launch. So we still have our other clearinghouse that's out there, but because we're at this point in the project and we've collected so much great information from everybody, we wanted to create a repository and somewhere to go to now. This is only open to those that have received the invitation to sign into and get an account. It's not for public consumption. This is, I guess you could say, is our sandbox for this larger work group in Indiana to network within and learn from each other. So everything that's in the repository here is to help you benefit, grow, and expand your institution's programs and services. Then other tabs might be go to general resources. And I think we have a lot of ACE and CALE links out there.
Yeah,
Oh,
before I do
yeah,
that,
yeah.
I want to make one more point. You can download these by this little pop out on the top, and it will open up the document. You can download it, print it off, and go from there, or quickly review it. So just another resource for you. And under the general resources,
Yeah. So there
lots
you
of
have,
websites.
yeah, you have the Indiana Clearinghouse site, you have the Collegiate Purple Star site, you have the many previous reports and resources that were provided in the previous projects when we had a statewide task force and work groups around specific targets and chapters that went into the model policy guidance for Indiana that was adopted last year. And then other related military websites that we know that you could benefit. You could also utilize this for onboard training of any new staff that your institution hires that will play a role in administering and managing military credit for prior learning. So you have like a one-stop shop here. Eventually, when the Clearinghouse 2.0 is ready to be launched by the Commission of Higher Ed, all of this that we've collected in this repository will transfer up into that new website.
Mhm. And then under the local institutions, this is very specific to where you are. So military culture articles, demographics, related information, more webinars. Uh, the ACE one is a really good one to understand how the ACE guide and institutions portal can be used to share information between our campuses. In addition, we have the directory for all of our current ambassadors and the schools that they're connected with. These are the folks that have been on our working group as we move through implementing a statewide military CPL program.
So another way that you can network with your peers across the state, their emails, their phone numbers. We collected all of this as part of that assessment survey back in June.
In addition, there's a ambassador talking point page. So and this really is available to everyone in this community, this MCPL community, because as you're talking with senior leaders, you want to be able to address certain issues for them. Don, did it show up? The document show
Yes.
up?
Yep,
Okay,
it
good.
does. Yeah. And so what
Excellent.
we did with this is a little bit different than the previous ambassador talking points that was approved last year for the big credit for prior learning program. This is more specific to military credit for prior learning. And we broke it out by audience. So if you are talking to institution faculty or administrators, or maybe a board member of your board of trustees, you have quick 6 talking points of what are the benefits of these programs and services. And then you have a section for just the military affiliated students when you're advising them what is the benefit of going through the military, requesting military credit for prior learning. And then we have the faculty benefits and role. A lot of times this is where you'll see some program barriers, and that is no faculty buy-in. Well, here are some talking points that will help you overcome those barriers and to build a stronger capacity of support for why there is a military credit for prior learning programs or services at your institution. And like Dallas said, you can download this, print it out. But we thought this was, and it's another great tool to use when you're onboarding new staff to train them around what this program is and what it's not. We even
Just
have the yeah, it's just a really good tool,
right. Lots of
resource
good
to
stuff.
have. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let's see here. I think that's it for that
Mhm.
page. And then we put some marketing ideas out there, branding, and how we might do some different things. This is still something in work, so any suggestions, we're glad to hear them. And then last of all, our working group, who's all involved and how to get hold of us. All right.
Yep.
I think that covers it.
And so
So
please, if you don't have access to this repository, please reach out to any of us, Stacy, Steve St. John, Dallas, or myself, and we'll get you in your account registered with that. Also, keep checking back because we are in this ourselves, updating it weekly and daily sometimes. So check back for refresh and updates because by the time, hopefully, when the Commission of Higher Ed has their Clearinghouse 2.0 ready, this should be almost a perfect where they just copy paste it over or transfer it up. So, but we can't get there without your support and your input. And like Dallas said earlier, if there's anything that you see that doesn't fit within your realm, please let us know and we'll work with you to change it so it's more meaningful and impactful for you, but also others that can benefit from these tools. Any questions? I think we conclude. We have a few minutes here for questions.
All right. Well, again, thank you both, Don and Dallas, for such an informative session. And again, to all of you who are able to join us. And we know there are many more that have contributed to this work. So again, a big thank you. And as Steve mentioned, this recording of the webinar will be posted on the Google site and we'll be sharing more details later. So we hope to see you on Friday's version, the last of our series. So again, thank you and have a great rest of your day.